Nothing in this podcast is meant for medical advice. Please discuss your own healthcare with your healthcare providers. Thank you. Welcome to your B-side, your midlife metamorphosis. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Lindsey. Midlife is not a crisis, it's a catalyst to your best life. Join me each week for a dose of mental, physical, and spiritual health, life, grief, adventure, and opportunity. It's time to flip the record over. Hello, this is Dr. Amy, your host of Welcome to Your B-Side, Your Midlife Metamorphosis. And I'm just letting everybody know that this week's podcast is my last podcast for a while on Welcome to Your B-Side. I'm taking a little bit of a break to pursue some of my own creative pursuits and some of my own little nudges that are coming strongly to me from my intuition, from source, from the divine, whatever you want to call it. And I talk a lot about this on this podcast, and it's been very meta for me that I'm now in a place where I need to follow this next breadcrumb, this next iteration of myself. I chose this interview as my last one for Welcome to Your B-Side for now, because Deb, who I interview, is a perfect example of having gone through a major midlife pivot, who has followed her dream of pursuing photography just bit by bit, slowly by slow, and is really inspiring. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. I hope you enjoy Deb's energy and her wisdom and her ability to just follow that internal voice that she had and just where it led her. It's really, really inspiring. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you all soon. I mean that. Love you, mean it. Hello, and welcome to the B-Side, Midlife Metamorphosis with me, your host, Dr. Amy Lindsey. I'm so excited today. I have a very special guest on the podcast, my good friend, Deb Achak, who is a Seattle-based fine art photographer working in large-scale color photography. Her work explores interior landscapes and emotional and metaphysical connections between human experience and the natural world. Her photographs have been exhibited widely in the United States and internationally, and she's just an all-around awesome human being, and I'm so happy to welcome you on the podcast today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So I want to start off, I always think it's a good place to start from a frame of reference, how we know each other. Everyone I tend to interview on this podcast, I know them somehow. And I met you at your house.
That's right.
And my experience was you were hosting a barbecue and an event that our spouses were kind of part of. They are part of a pickleball community in West Seattle and in Seattle, and they were having like a pickleball friends and family barbecue at your house.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I had been there and met you, and John and I showed up, and we didn't really know where we were supposed to go. You know, we didn't know, like, do we go to the side of the house, the back of the house? So we basically just walked right in your front door. We just walked into your house.
Yeah. Because the party's on the side yard, but it's a little hidden from the street as you approach.
So my first thought was, oh, shoot, nobody's in the house. We just walked into these people's house. And then the second thought, and this is really important, is I was instantly struck by the art in your house. So I walked into your house and immediately I was like, oh, someone's an artist. and I don't know if you've had that experience yourself, but you go into an artist's home, someone who's like a passionate, intentional artist, and their home is a work of art as well. And that was the first thing. I was like, oh, there's an artist in this house. And I didn't really know you and Ramin very well. I didn't really know that you were an artist. I just knew, I was like, I'm going to like these people. And that was my second thought after, oops, I just walked into somebody's house. But we did find you on the side of the yard.
Yes.
And then
And
after
I
time,
remember meeting you. Yeah.
yeah, I later that day, you gave me the green light to then go up into your studio. And then I was like, okay, so she's the artist. Got it.
Well, I remember it was really sweet. You said, permission to tour your house. And I was hosting and I was, that we had like
Yeah.
maybe 50 people in the yard.
Yeah.
I was like, knock yourself out. Go
Yeah.
right ahead.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that because when people are living a creative life, I mean, it shows up in their home. And so for me, that was very interesting way I kind of got to know you, literally like sneaking around your house by permission. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of got a feeling for who you were, and I saw some of your own photographs on the wall. And then it was only over time that I kind of learned about your history, was that you were not always a photographer,
No.
that you worked in, I think, social work. I'll let you speak
Yep.
to all that. And you're a
Hmm.
mother and a spouse, and you live in the Seattle community, and at some point you started taking photos. So can you go back in time and
Yeah.
tell us like what your first career was, what
Yeah.
you were doing at that time, and then what got you to pivot into being an artist and a photographer?
Okay. Happy to. Well, I will say when I was an undergraduate, I'm from New Hampshire and I'm a long way from home in Seattle. But when I was an undergraduate, I was sort of in the art, like I was studying lots of art. So I was an English literature major, a studio art minor, women's studies minor. And I was just following things that really interested me. Like I didn't have a plan. I was the first in my family to go to college. No one was directing me on a path. So I studied the things that interested me most. And then when I was done with school, since I knew no working artists, it was just not anything I had any connection to whatsoever. I thought, okay, now I have a degree and now I need a real job. Okay. And it was just my understanding of the world, right? I have to go out and make money. I don't have any understanding of how to ever be a working artist. It wasn't even a question I asked myself, right? So, about a year after graduating, I moved to Seattle. I was looking for work. I ended up finding a job at Harborview, which is the big trauma hospital, working in the social
Mm,
work department. I wasn't a social worker yet, but I was working sort of in a bachelor's level kind of positioning there. And I ended up really loving that work. And I did that work for about 9 years. During that time, I met my husband and we got married. And then after we got married, I left and went to graduate school for social work at University of Washington. I ended up working at the university hospital when I graduated with my degree. And I worked with high risk pregnancies. And this is relevant to because there's what got me into art. We were struggling to get pregnant at the very time I was working with high risk pregnant women at the hospital. It was a really interesting time because I really loved that population. It was like great fit for me, but also just really hard because everyone I was around was pregnant and I was trying so hard to get pregnant.
mhm,
So it took us 3 years to get pregnant, and frankly, nothing worked, and we ended up getting pregnant naturally. So it was kind of really unusual and such a blessing. And but I needed to keep that job because Ramin had started his company, and I
mm,
was the insurance provider for the
mm,
family. So when Henry was about one, Ramin's company got to a place where I could leave that career and I could be home full time, which is just a deep desire I had. I didn't know I'd had it. I thought I'd set myself up for a great career where I could maybe work part time as a social worker and be a mom. And that's just what I envisioned would be like perfect fit for me. But I think 3 years of trying to get pregnant and just really attaching to this little creature, I just really wanted to be home. And so when
mm,
I got the green light that I could be, I seized that opportunity. And so he was about one. And when we celebrated his first birthday, my mother came out from New Hampshire to visit us. And she had a nagging cough. We didn't understand what it
mm,
was. It ended up being lung cancer. And it was kind of perfect that I had left my career so I could be really available to take care of her. So I flew back and forth to the East Coast to take care of her, bringing the baby with me.
mm,
And then she eventually moved to Seattle and lived with us for the last year of her life. She fought cancer for 2 years. And while I was caring for her, caring for a 2-year-old, my husband was traveling constantly for his new company. I discovered I was pregnant with my second son, Lewis. And so was carrying a huge load
mhm,
physically, emotionally, just in terms of my time. everything. And my mother passed, and then 25 days later, my second son was born.
Oh my
So I have
goodness.
this primordial stew of mother loss and mothering all combined. And it took about 4 years. I mean, I was highly functional, but grieving, but getting through the day and taking care of things. Ramin was still traveling constantly. But about 4 years after that, I really started to come to life again. And that's when I picked up a camera. All along in the back of my head, I was like, well, maybe I'll return to social work. But also, I was like, yeah, social work is such an incredible career, but it can, in some ways, take more than it gives because you don't make a lot of money. The hours are intense. It's a huge burden. And to try and juggle that with motherhood, it just like ended up not being a box I could go back into. But I picked up a camera and I didn't ask it any questions. I was never thinking career, right? I was just thinking, I'm taking care of these kids all day, but I'm feeding something creative in me that I let go dormant many years ago when I graduated from college. And I just followed breadcrumb after breadcrumb. I signed up for all kinds of interesting classes and joined groups. I was certainly motivated to photograph the kids, which, was a big deal for me. But like slowly, 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 things like really, really opened up for me where I got really intentional about what I was photographing. I got really interested in filmmaking. So I was using my camera to make what I call memoir films of our
Hmm.
family, sometimes just 30 seconds. Actually, I had one in the Seattle International Film Festival many years ago. So that was really cool. And then I learned all about fine art printing. Like, I was like, why am I learning about fine art? I don't understand what I'm doing with this camera, but that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
And it was for me because I needed to describe that part about leaving my career and my mother because there was this deep rupture,
Yes.
right? And when I came out of the other side of that rupture, I had permission, I guess, or it just there was just no going back to the way it was before. I was different.
Can I want to stay in the grief part for just a second because I think it's really
Yeah.
important. I feel like, well, a lot of things happen in grief when we lose somebody. So I'm not going to try to give you like a 3 bullet point situation here, but there is something that I feel like happens to people, and I call it the clarity.
Yeah.
That suddenly you're faced with what matters to you.
Yeah.
And like right after your mother died, you're not grabbing the camera. I mean, you had an infant.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's part of this survival going on. You're just surviving the day. You have a toddler and an infant. And anyone who's ever had a toddler or an infant or both at the same time knows that you're in it. You're in it as a mother. And
Yeah.
then you're coping with the loss, but there's probably a little bit of survival going on. And
Yeah.
then you said 4 years later, then 4 years
4 years.
later, almost like your nervous system relaxed for a second and allowed you to remember the camera.
Yeah. And I think back, I remember I was definitely searching for something.
Mm.
I just had this calling to use my hands. So like I made a community garden for the kids on our street. I learned how to knit. I like was constantly doing things with my hand and then I held a camera
Hmm.
and something interested me. And I'm not a highly technical person, but I looked forward to reading that manual and understanding the camera. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I looked forward to learning, editing programs and how to do really technical things on the computer. And I was like, this is really like, I just was really curious and kind of delighted by it, kind of amused by myself. And it was a great feeling.
Yeah. And so not only were you taking photos of your family, but
Right.
then you started taking other photos. And then then film now, then now you're
Yeah.
making film.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the next thing is, oh, what's this fine art project? Can you fine art printing? So,
Yeah.
how long was the period of time? And not that it really matters so much, but I think it's important, it's not like it just happened one day and then the next day. How can you describe like how long were you taking photos and before you then started making films, before you then started getting into fine art printing?
Probably a couple years after I picked up a camera. Well, I joined a self-portraiture group. There were
Oh, I
200
love it.
women from all over the world. And we were taking self-portraits and writing about our lives and sharing on Flickr in this private group. We've become very close. These are like lifelong friends now,
Hmm.
all over the world. Really incredible. And I remember thinking, oh, they'll never let me in. I'm just a mom with a camera. And it turns out everyone was intimidated and everyone made great work. And it was really incredible. So I kept like, I still do this to this day. I'll throw a flag really far down the field and then I'll just figure out how I'm going to get to it. Right. So
Hmm.
I signed up for class after class like that. And then I saw this woman who was doing these incredible films, and I signed up for her workshops and learned how to do it. And all the while, I'm like, will this turn into something? I don't know. I'm just having fun right now. Right. And then all the while, people are seeing that my passion is really growing and everyone's trying to be so helpful. Like, oh, you should maybe be a family photographer. And I think I'd try that on for size and I'd be like wrangling kids and dads on the weekend. Nope, nope, that it's not that. Everyone's giving really helpful suggestions. And so I would just plod along with my learning and my education about what I was doing. And I'd say maybe 4 years go by before I learned fine art printing. But I can tell you, in the house that you toured, we hadn't lived in that house for all that long, but I remember rounding a corner and I just got this flash of insight that said
Mm.
art on walls. That was the
Ooh.
message in my head, art on
Ooh, I
walls.
just got chills.
I know. And I was like, what the heck was that? Like, that's really interesting. But it really sat well in my body.
Hmm.
Followed by, who the hell do you think you are?
Of
The
course.
inner critic, right? But I just did it anyway. I think the key to my success with photography is I could neither succeed great or fail horribly in those early, the chrysalis stages.
Mm.
And I let it be that for a really long time. And people would ask what I was up to, and I would just deflect a little because I didn't really know what to call it. And I was just really enjoying the gestation of it, the way we keep a pregnancy quiet in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I did that for quite a while. And then I would literally sit in a lab shoulder to shoulder with this incredible mentor named Juan Aguilera. And he was teaching me everything he knew about fine art digital printing. And what was interesting was I worked on a series of photographs, actually, that one right next to me
Hmm.
in the water. I've skipped a step. I bought a housing for my camera and I started swimming with my camera. Another thing, I had no idea why I was doing it. It was a big investment for someone who didn't know why she was buying this equipment, but I just felt like this was important for me to do. So I started swimming with my camera and creating these beautiful images, but I didn't know what to do with them. And then I began sitting in the digital lab with Juan, and he was teaching me how to perfect these files onto paper. And I ended up coming away with 6 beautiful prints. And then I bought myself a a really lovely portfolio holder with a
Hmm.
handle, like I remember carrying when I was an undergrad and taking
Yeah.
these art classes. And I remember I tucked it, it's actually still over there. I tucked it in my studio. I didn't know why I printed them and made them perfect. I didn't know why I bought the portfolio, but I tucked it over there. And through some interesting circumstances, basically Instagram, right? People noticed them because I posted something about them and said, who did this work? What is this work? I'd love to see this work. And I began the process of carrying that portfolio around to different designers that I knew in the
Hmm.
city, and they started buying the work.
Hey, this is Dr. Amy Lindsey, your host of Welcome to Your B-Side, your midlife metamorphosis YouTube channel and podcast. If you want to be more involved with my B-Side community, you can join on School. That's SKOOL. You can join my school community. Look me up, Dr. Amy Lindsey. Welcome to your B-Side and request to join. I love it. There's so much here.
There's a lot.
There's
There's
so
a
much here.
lot, Amy.
It's so awesome. I love this. I love your whole story. So, one thing I want to touch on is this idea of keeping it quiet at first.
Yeah,
And I think that's very sound advice because I think when we're trying something new and we don't really know what it is, we're not really in a position to answer questions.
right,
And I don't think it's the place for so many opinions from the
right,
rest of the world, right?
right.
Because even though people are well intentioned,
Yep.
really, if we're truly like trying to follow our heart or follow our soul or like follow these little breadcrumbs for something that we're meant to do, we have to stay with ourselves, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. We have to stay super grounded in ourself and listen to ourself. And then so
Yeah.
you round the corner of the house you're living in now, and it's art
Yep.
on the walls. And I
Yep.
like I even that gives me chills because I walked into your house and I was like, "Oh, there's an artist in here." Right? An artist lives here. But
Uh-huh.
it's so incredible that, not only do you have the art on the walls, but you're talking about that little nudge you got in that moment because yeah, it's going to look different for everybody. And I think there's another thing I really want to touch on here, and that is this idea that way back when you didn't see art as a way to make a living or it
Right.
doesn't, and I think that's a message we get from society
Yeah.
that it's frivolous, it's a hobby, it's not a real job, it's something you do on the side, but that's not how you make a living.
Right.
And I think there's so many messages that come at us with art like this. And yet, art is one of the most important things of human experience.
Right. Exactly.
It's one
Exactly.
of the most important things about being a creative person and being a human being. And in
Mhm.
fact, it's so important. I would say we can't live without it at this point in our evolution. Like we've
Right.
gone so far beyond, food, clothing, and shelter. I mean, you know, not to say that we don't still have some of those issues in our society, but we've, it's almost like creativity is like an upgrade to the
Yeah.
human being. Now, like we can't live without it.
Right.
And yet there's still all these messages that somehow we're not responsible if we pursue creative living or art.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true.
And then you weren't like trying to commodify it super early and like, well, I could like take pictures of families on weekends. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of beautiful,
Nothing. Oh
amazing,
my God, it's incredible. But I would
amazing.
try it on for size, like a sweater,
Yeah,
and I'd be like, no, that sweater doesn't fit. I got to take that
exactly.
off again. That's
And
what I was saying.
that's the whole thing, though. That's the
Yeah,
whole thing. For someone, that's going to be exactly what they need to be doing, and that's exactly
totally.
their calling. And for
Yes.
you, could have done it because maybe it made sense
Yep.
intellectually,
Right.
but your spirit was like, no,
Yeah.
something else.
And it helped. I had a full-time gig. I was taking care of kids all day, so no
Yeah.
one was really pestering me. Like I had a very important job at home.
Yes.
So I could
Yes.
have this little secret that was evolving very quietly, you know? And I have an analogy about that because I really want, I like to share this with people who get excited maybe about a writing project and share it, and then they never finish it and they feel awful later, you know, like whatever the project is. We all do that from time to time. But I think of those early ideas as like a tiny match, right?
Mm-hmm.
And criticism, you know, heavy criticism can blow that match out really quickly. Even people who are so excited for you, they just like, you know, breathe on you and the match goes out, right? But like if you take that match and you add a little kindling and you add a little paper, like the fire gets a little bit stronger, but it still needs tending. And I think a really good time to talk about your creative process is when it's a roaring bonfire,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's creating light for people who are really far away, right? And then at that point, all the people who support you, they can be throwing logs on that bonfire, making it even bigger. Criticism won't put the fire out, right?
That's right.
And it takes on a life of its own. And that's a really good time to start sharing with the world what you're doing.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Like this gestation or this chrysalis period that you spoke about.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
share with a few people. I also don't have a huge desire to share for whatever reason. Like I'm not just dying to share. I'll tell friends, "Oh, I'm working on such and such project," and they'll say, "I haven't seen any of the work yet." And I'll be like, "Oh, you know, we'll get around to it eventually." You know, like, but
Yeah.
I don't feel this deep desire. I share it with mentors or a couple trusted people while it's developing, and I'm still asking it lots of questions and not fully understanding it myself. But I don't expose. That feels too exposed to share it with a lot of people early for me.
Yeah. I did a creative living workshop recently in Amsterdam with Liz Gilbert.
Oh.
And yeah, poor me. Um,
Yeah.
and honestly, it was like one of the most transformative 2 days of my life. But she does talk about this, and she talks
Does she?
about in her writing a lot about what you're saying, she said, I have all these books in me that need to be born, but
Yeah.
I don't send anyone pages for a long time. I'm not
Yeah.
sending my publisher anything. I don't send anybody anything
Yeah.
until I get it all out and get it just kind of worked completely out. Then I get a little clinical and then start to decide what I need to do with it. And
Right.
she said, and then sometimes I don't do anything with it. Sometimes I
That's right.
write an entire book and no one ever sees it.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then other
Yep.
times I'm like, okay, this one, this
This one
one,
has legs. This one needs to walk out in
this
the
one
world.
needs to walk out of my studio. Yeah.
Yeah.
S-
Totally. I get it.
Yeah.
Her book Big Magic was very influential
Mm.
because that came out during my,
Ooh.
early-ish. I'd have to look at the dates, but I thought it really resonated with me.
Yeah. That book is one of our permission slips, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about identity a little bit?
Sure.
Because I find it so fascinating. I don't think that people are consciously making these big identity leaps in their lives. You're not necessarily saying, okay, now I'm going to go be a mother, right? Like you have a desire for it and you pursue it, or you have a desire to pick up a camera and you pursue it. But I don't know that as human beings we are prepared for the identity shift. And I
Right. Yeah.
think that sometimes if we are experiencing an identity shift, it starts to change our relationships. Can you talk a little bit about some of the change of in your relationships from becoming an artist? Like how did that impact your relationship with your spouse, your kids, your friends, the people who knew you as like something else? Like
Right.
can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't think I can't even imagine having walked out of the hospital and then gone to straight to picking up a camera. That would have been really jarring. But I had like a massive schism, a huge rupture in everything I understood about the world. And then I think it was a little easier for me to transition, but there was still internally a lot of imposter syndrome. And I
Mm,
just had to consciously turn the volume down on that and crank up the volume on the things that felt really good. But like, definitely, who the hell do you think you are? And it
mhm.
seemed to me like every story I ever heard about a photographer is they were born with a camera in their hand, or a kindly uncle showed them how to, print in a dark room. And I just felt like I didn't hear a story of a woman in her 40s with a couple of kids at her side, grabbing a camera and turning it into something, meaningful in the art world to whatever extent I've done that. And so I kept that really quiet. So that identity that I just recently got this, bug to do this, I kept that quiet for a really long
Mm,
time. And now that I'm more deeply established in my career, I'm much more open about talking about it because I want to open that door for other people. That identity shift is possible. I mean, there's a reason why long before I picked up a camera, I was obsessed with Julia Child. She started
mhm.
her career in her 40s,
Yeah.
right? Like I was really fascinated with reinvention stories, not even realizing why, or even as I was in my own reinvention story. But I just found myself like leaning way in when I heard about anyone who did a massive pivot in their life. And then it was interesting that I was like quietly doing my own it took me a while to realize, oh, the reason you were obsessed with that is because you were actually manifesting it at the same time.
Mhm. What did
But
your
identity
family
shift, I mean,
say?
what did my family? Oh, they loved it. They applauded. I mean, my like family of origin has always
Mm.
just thought I'm a little of an outlier. So they really love and respect me, but they're like, we don't understand it. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
they really love and respect it. My husband and the kids, they're just great about it. Absolutely great.
That's
And the kind
awesome.
of career I designed for myself, I could do a lot of this work from the time I dropped off at school until the time I picked up at school. I built my whole career from about 9:30 in the morning till about 2:30 in the afternoon with a little grocery shopping in between.
Yeah.
Jammed it all in there,
I love that. And I love what you said about reinvention in your 40s.
Yeah.
So much of this podcast is about that. This whole idea of your B side that I started to talk about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And I would talk about it with my clients because I mostly work with women, but all genders in midlife. And the B side in music is a rarity, or it's just chronological, like it's the other side of the record. But what
Yeah.
typically a B-side is a more vulnerable, more personal tracks that an artist has created, something that feels more emotional or more true to their self, or a risk that they took. And so I love this analogy, and I think that these later in life pivots are
Yeah.
truly where the magic is,
Yeah, totally.
that
Totally.
we finally get to this. And I'm sure this is true for you, but you can, tell us your own version of this. I feel like the beauty of getting older is that you start to turn the volume down on imposter syndrome. You
Yeah.
start to ask the question, what makes me happy? What do I actually desire in my life? And even if you're not conscious that you're asking the question, I think we are on some level asking it, and it will come ask us.
Right. Right.
Your
Yeah.
mother will die, or,
Yep.
something will happen. So if we're not asking the question will come for us.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, without really thinking about it, I picked a career where the longer you do it, the better you get, right? That doesn't happen in all careers, as you can kind of feel like you age out of certain careers. I hear friends talk about that sometimes. And it's something I can keep doing once the kids launch. And I'm right on the cusp of a whole other pivot where I won't have kids in my home much longer. I've got one in college already. I've got one who's a junior in high school. And I'm looking at the next pivot, which is a home without kids in it on a day-to-day basis. And again, asking the question, like, who am I? What do I want to do? But I feel in a more comfortable, I think I'll be in fetal position for a couple days, truly. But I also think I've teed myself up really well to transition into that phase. And I'm super grateful. Like this little seed of an idea is going to fuel me for so long. Who knew? You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah. I love it so much. Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on one last idea. And that's this concept. Like, I truly believe that art heals.
Yeah.
And it's not just, it's the experience of art that's healing, I think. And it's so important, even with everything that's going on in the world. I feel like there's always everything going on in the world. Like, if it's not one thing, it's another. And there's a
Right.
lot of pain and suffering in the world. And sometimes it can feel frivolous to make art. But I feel like art is what is worth living, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
No,
what
100%.
shows the beauty in the terror. Of who was it? Rainier Wilke, who has that poem, Leaning into Beauty in the Terror, as well. And I don't think it's just the art, but it's the audacity.
Mm,
Like,
yes.
it's the audacity that despite lifing us personally, and the world having so much pain and suffering, that we have the audacity to continue to follow joy and to follow art.
Yes. It's so true. It's interesting you should bring this up because the project I'm working on now that it's pretty far along in its gestation, but I love to talk about the idea because it ties into my original social work career. And
Mm-hmm.
a big part of a social work career, the way I did it, there's a lot of ways to be a social worker, is I did a lot of triage. So an emergency call would come in and I have to figure out the best pathway for care. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned that I loved, my brain really loved to triage crisis situations. And I think of it like the old-fashioned train destination boards where all the letters and the numbers would flip, 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 and then a destination becomes clear. That's what my brain does with a crisis, right?
Mm.
So fast forward to the last inauguration and the first Trump administration, I was filled with protest and anger and like active engagement that was really around, that had just a lot. I was angry, right? And I needed that, right? But I'm facing another 4 years, and I check in with my nervous system. I think I can't do it that way. I have to do it differently this time. I want to stay engaged, but I need to do it differently. And so my triage brain kicks in. And I began this process of turning down the volume of the news. I'm still engaged. I still check in. It's just not as much, right? And then cranking up the volume on creating art. And I'm a Libra. Libras are a scale, right? So I'm constantly doing this with my hands. And what am I doing? I'm trying to balance the scales because the world is hard and beauty is so incredible. Balance the scales so I can get up every day. I can maintain my resilience, right? And that's done with art and beauty. And art and beauty is everywhere. What I'm doing, like since January, a year and a half ago, is I'm just going out with my camera. And if something strikes me and I feel a sense of awe, I take a photo of it. And then I stick it in a folder and I don't think about it. And I get up the next day or the next evening when the light is pretty, when family is around, when I'm on a walk in the forest with my dog, and I'm just collecting photos and putting them in a folder. And I notice what this does for my nervous system is absolutely profound. Like it is what is helping me get through right now. And I think it is sort of an innate need we all have to create something that makes us feel good. It stabilizes us. Art is therapy.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better. And I'm so grateful that you took the time today to be on the podcast and to share your story. And I'm sure that this podcast alone, in you sharing your story, is medicine for people. And hopefully it inspires people that if you even have a thought or an idea and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't matter. Just start pursuing it slowly, 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 and see where you end up.
I hope people will recognize the fact that it doesn't make sense kind of means you need to do it.
Exactly.
And your logical brain will want to tell you not to do it. Do it anyway. Just
Yes,
do it anyway. Rivers will not run backwards,
that's
right?
right.
Just go ahead and do it.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Deb. I can't
Thank you,
wait to
Amy.
see the reaction from this podcast. I'm sure it'll be massive. You're so generous with your time and your art, and I really appreciate you. So thanks for being on the podcast.
It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
This has been another episode of Welcome to Your B-Side, your midlife metamorphosis with Dr. Amy Lindsey. Be sure to follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.